Early Indic art embodies deep philosophic concepts. It takes us on a journey through the development of man's spiritual thoughts, on a path which seeks the goal of the eternal truth. Numerous stupas were made in the Buddhist and Jaina traditions in India for many centuries. The stupa was a profound symbolic representation of liberation from the bindings of the material world. Beyond the sculpted gateways and railings, beyond the great entrance of the rock-cut caves, beyond the surrounding walls of the temples, lies the most sophisticated presentation of the philosophic truth. Here is that which takes our attention away from the multiplicity of the forms of the world to the concept of the formless eternal. The followers of the Buddha enshrined his mortal remains in a number of stupas. Thus began a tradition which spread to many countries and continues till today. Later stupas housed the remains of other great teachers, their personal belongings, and also Buddhist teachings. In early Buddhist and Jaina shrines, from the 2nd century BC onwards, the focus was on meditation. The aim was release from the cycle of the pain of life. The eternal themes were represented in art, and personalities were not shown. Generalized depictions of men and women were seen along with the natural world. Yakshas and yakshis, embodying the creative force of nature, were a favorite subject. The first formalized deity, seen from the 2nd century BC onwards, was Lakshmi, lustrated by elephants. In the meantime, Buddhas, or the enlightened ones, were alluded to by symbols of their achievement and presence. Forms of the world were represented on railings and gateways, as well as on the exteriors of rock-cut caves. With the passage of time, these forms were also brought into the interior of the hall of meditation. However, in the heart of the shrine, there were no forms. The gentleness of the figures we passed on our way to the shrine had prepared us, till finally we were to meditate upon that which was formless and beyond the world of form, beyond desire and pain. Coming into India from the north, Mathura was strategically placed at the entrance to the plains of the river Ganga. Thus it was a major junction of trade. It was also a great center of culture and art. Under the Kushanas, who ruled from the 1st to the 3rd centuries AD, Mathura became the winter capital of their empire. The Kushanas, or the Yuezhi, were tribes who came from southern China. They patronized Buddhism and the Brahmanas, as Indian kings had done before them. However, theirs was a different vision. The subject of art in India was the eternal themes, not transient personalities. In this vision, there were no portraits of kings, even though they were benevolent to all streams of spiritual thought. Buddhas, or enlightened ones, and Jaina Tirthankaras were also not depicted. They were alluded to by symbols of their achievement and presence. It was not their ephemeral personalities, but the ideas they embodied, which were the message of the art. The Kushanas brought another outlook with them. They were the first kings in India to have portraits made of themselves. Near Mathura, as well as their other capital at Peshawar, they built royal shrines with images of themselves. There is a statue of Bhima Cadphises, described as King of Kings, Son of God, and so on. Another portrait statue has a similar inscription, this time bestowing the royal and divine titles upon Emperor Kanishka. He is dressed as a Scythian, with padded boots and heavy clothes. The cult of the worship of kings did not last beyond the rule of the Kushanas. However, in this period, a new focus came on the depiction of personalities in art. Images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Jain Tirthankaras, Shiva, Vishnu, Kartikeya, and other Brahmanical deities were created. These followed the earlier models of the Yakshas and Nagas. Kushana coins present some of the earliest images of the Buddha. A Kushana coin also brings a very early image of Lord Shiva. He is seen with his characteristic trident and Nandi the bull who accompanies him. From the 2nd century BC, there were 2 Jaina stupas at Kankali Tila near Mathura. Sculpted remains have been found which show the close similarity of art as well as that of symbols of both the Buddhist and Jaina faiths. The region also had flourishing temples dedicated to Naga deities. An imposing image over 8 feet tall, inscribed as a bodhisattva, was installed around AD 100 at Shravasti. It was donated by a bhikshu or monk named Bala. The standing bodhisattvas or Buddhas carry forward the formal frontality of earlier yaksha figures, which emphasizes their monumentality. The body displays the softness of human flesh, unlike muscular and athletic depictions. The form in which the Buddha was presented was that of an enlightened being, one out of many, with 32 attributes that identified him as such. The long arms and elongated earlobes, as well as the urna, a mark on the forehead, and the ushnisha on the top of the head, are some of the auspicious marks. A number of images of seated Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have been found, including a fine one from the Katra mound. This was donated by Amoha Asi, a nun, for the welfare and happiness of all sentient beings. This is a common wish expressed in the donative inscriptions of all faiths in this period. The quality of prana or inner breath is evident in the figure. There is a quality of animation and life which marks this figure as a masterpiece of Kushana period art. At Kankali Tila near Mathura was found an image of Surya, who represents the sun. While images of deities were coming into being in the art of Mathura, the main focus still remained on stupas, Buddhist and Jaina. As in Buddhist monuments, the Jaina stupa, which once stood at Kankali Tila, presents us the ultimate goal of every being. As we approach it, we are greeted by images of the creative forces. On the railings of the Buddhist and Jaina stupas, the yakshis and the trees which they stand against or grasp represent nature. We must remember that in Indian thought, all beings, human, animal, and plant, are intrinsically the same. This kinship of life is perfectly expressed in these images, where the touch of a maiden brings trees to blossom. The summer capital of the Kushanas was at Peshawar in the Gandhara region. Buddhism had reached this area in the 3rd century BC with the emissaries sent by Emperor Ashoka. This region was a meeting point of the cultures which travelled on the trade routes from China to the Mediterranean. Concepts of Indic philosophy, which placed emphasis on the renunciation of worldly desires, were new to many here. Kanishka held the 4th Great Buddhist Council in Kashmir. This was the first time that Mahayana Buddhism was given the full support of royal patronage. The council was also significant for making the Sanskrit language the main vehicle for Buddhist scriptures. The Mahayana school of thought, which was far less austere than earlier Buddhism, soon gained popularity in the Gandhara region. It also spread from here to Central Asia and China. Little remains of the numerous Buddhist monuments which were made in the Kushana times in the Gandhara region. However, vast numbers of sculptures of this period have survived. The stone these were made from is the local grey schist. The sculptures of this region show influences of Mediterranean and Persian styles. Instead of the spiritual, idealized forms of the mainstream tradition, these attempt to present the appearance of people in the world and their everyday expressions. The drapery shows the influence of Western models. Whereas in the Mathura school, the figures are presented in transparent light clothing, here the garments are made with heavy folds, and a great emphasis is given to their plasticity. The body is more muscular, in keeping with Greek and Roman norms. In early Buddhism, the focus was within oneself, on the potential for enlightenment which is in each of us. In the Gandhara region, the attention began to go more towards a heroic personality of the Buddha and other Buddhas as distinct individuals. These could be prayed to for their help. A number of Buddhas, as mentioned in scriptures, including Gautama and Dipankara Buddha, are depicted in Gandhara art. The Jatakas, or stories of the previous lives of the Buddha, in the form of different men and animals, were the subject of the earlier art. These were based upon the Indic philosophic view, which saw the unity of all of creation and the cycle of births in the world of illusory forms. The population of the Gandhara region was not deeply versed in this philosophy, and they would have found it simpler to relate to the life of the individual Gautama Buddha. The worship of the stupa continued in Gandhara. However, the stupa was considerably smaller and it was surrounded by rows of image shrines. These contained images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and their large numbers indicate the shift in the emphasis of worship. Unlike Gautama Buddha, who is beyond worldly adornments, Bodhisattvas are made adorned with jewelry, which are symbolic of their spiritual attainments. Beyond the world of forms, the stupa had earlier been kept plain. Now, narrative panels relating the life of the Buddha were placed on it at the base. The 4 great events in the Buddha's life were presented most often. Other incidents and legends from his life were also introduced. Here, the emphasis became more on the drama of life in the ephemeral world. Human life, personified in the Buddha, before and after enlightenment, became the vehicle of the message. Depictions in the Gandhara region significantly dramatized the events of the Buddha's life and presented them with charged emotions. The first of the 4 great events to be presented in the narrative sequences which were created was the birth of the Buddha. Here, Queen Maya is made in the continuing tradition of yakshis who stand beneath trees. The name Maya means the illusory nature of the world of forms and may serve as a constant reminder for us. At the event of his enlightenment, the Buddha is depicted meditating under a peepal tree. Mara, meaning to kill, represents the turbulence of desires within us. He and his army are shown attacking the Buddha with a variety of weapons. The Buddha remains serene. The first sermon is depicted with deer below to indicate the location at the deer park at Sarnath. The final great event is the parinirvana of the Buddha, when he leaves behind the pains and shackles of his earthly body. The expression of grief of his followers is dramatic. Only one, the monk Subhadra, is peaceful, as he is aware of the transitory nature of all life. One of the most dramatic contributions of the Gandhara region to Buddhist art was the depiction of Gautama during his period of extreme asceticism. This depiction shows him severely emaciated, with bones and veins sticking out. It is an exaggerated presentation of dramatic proportions. The narrative depictions and figures in the art of Gandhara were formulated by the end of the 1st century AD. The sculpture flourished at its best in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The production of the Buddhist art of Gandhara came to an abrupt end in the 5th century with the invasion of the Huns. In the meantime, the tradition of art in the northern plains of India continued to evolve. Mathura continued as a vital center of Buddhist, Jaina and Brahmanical art. Sculptures made here have been found far and wide. The portrayal of deities had become central to Indic art. These deities were the personifications of qualities. By meditating upon them, we awaken the best which is within us. By meditating upon the Buddha, we hope to awaken the Bodhi, or true knowledge, within us. This concept of deities traveled from India to other countries of Asia. It took deep roots everywhere. Until today, the puja, or the adoration of deities, continues. These graceful representations move us and transport us far from worldly concerns to a peaceful realm within. They are a path to take us away from the pains created by our desires in the material world.
Buddham saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami, sangham saranam gacchami, buddham saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami.